Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spinner Rack, and we also have.
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
So, Marvel is announcing they're doing some more What If comic books. The What If TV show has been pretty big for them, 3 seasons. And right now they have What If Kitty Pryde Stole the Phoenix Force. They also have What If Loki was worthy? What if Wanda Maximoff and Peter Parker were siblings? What if Mark Spector was the host for Venom? And and we already said the Kitty Pryde thing. What is your thoughts on that?
What if Kitty Pryde stole the? How do you steal the Phoenix? I mean, I don't know if we ever did a show on it, but and I know we've talked off, off camera about what if. I'm a big fan. I was a very big fan of the series. The alt. I love the alternative takes. It felt very much in a like a Twilight, not Twilight Zone sort of feel to it, where these were alternative stories. The Watcher is Rod Serling. And the thing that I always got over the course of reading them is that the questions that readers would have, well, what if this and what if that, were always answered, okay, if this happens, you don't have the character that you like anymore. So a lot of times it was the ending would be like a character dying or they're powerless or the other things would happen at the end of the day. So you could have the alternative story, but you couldn't have both. You couldn't have the character and the alternative story for the most part. Every once in a while they would change that up, but for the most part, it was like, no, we have our definitive story, which is the Marvel universe, the 616 universe. That's the one that you really want to rock with. But I found a lot of them to be very entertaining, very creative. So much so that years later, when writers decided that they weren't going to create any new ideas for Marvel, they started robbing all the what if stories that, you know, what if Bruce Banner. Well, no, not so much. What if Bruce Banner had the Hulk's brain? But even with like a female Silver Surfer, all these things, they just rob from they just rob from it at the end of the day.
Hmm.
So when the What If series came out, I was very much interested in it, but I thought they never really hit the mark with any of them. The show director really seemed not to be interested in the Marvel universe, but in the universe she could create with What If. And so there were characters like,
You're talking about the TV show, right?
yeah, the TV show,
All right, I'm just
not the comic
gonna
series.
move over to just to show a screen of the TV show. So keep going.
Yeah, I thought for me, it literally was hit or miss. I would like an episode, not like an episode, like an episode. So I just really, what really came across to me was that the showrunner was interested in the characters that she created. So, Captain Carter, Evil Doctor Strange, the Native American girl who was made into some sort of omnipotent cosmic being. Those were the characters because the rest of them never really meshed with an alternative universe that was a reflection or a skewed reflection, if you will, of the Marvel universe. So bringing back What If, no problem. I've always enjoyed those stories, those alternative takes. If it's in the same vein of what we've been seeing on the TV show, I'm probably not going to enjoy it very much. For instance, if you start off with, well, what if Kitty Pryde stole the Phoenix Force? Okay, I'm very familiar with that storyline. That was a very popular storyline. And then I'm like, well, are they going to do the classic Phoenix storyline? Because that's the only time I could really see Kitty Pryde stealing, even being, within proximity. Or is it going to be something else where it was A versus X? And, I have no idea what the Phoenix Force now just seems like something you can go to the supermarket, and get in the aisle the way that it's used. But that's the bigger question. Like, well, where was Kitty ever in the proximity where she might have been able to get this? So those are the type of questions I start having. But I'm partial. I'm very sympathetic to What If because it, gave me a lot of enjoyment with those early issues. So yeah, this is something I'll be interested in seeing what they do if the execution is there and they're serious about presenting some good stories.
Well, I wanted to definitely bring in the TV show, and well, to say it doesn't seem to be anything connected to what we know in the comic book because the description is Kitty Pryde, Betsy Braddock, and America Chavez race against time to save Jean Grey and the X Men in this multiversal adventure, reimagined original Marvel origin stories. And then they have these volumes of what's already been published, which is the Loki Worthy, this Mark Spector as Venom, and then it's Peter Parker and Wanda Maximoff, which would make her Wanda Parker rather than Wanda Maximoff. But anyway, the thing is, what you tied into, I'm going to pose a question to you because I didn't figure this out. I was watching, uh, I was watching a Jim Valentino video. He had done a bunch of what ifs, and he was pitching to Marvel recently. I guess in the last 5 years, some ideas, and he pitched some what if ideas since he'd already done what if. He pitched some Guardian stuff, and then he's went with the editor, and the editor was pitching back some stuff, and he was like, "Well, what you're seeing in these what ifs, that's not a what if." And I was like, oh, I was on my seat. I was going to ask you, well, but you basically, I want to just say it. He said, that's not a what if. Like, these are imaginary stories. Like, imaginary stories don't have to have any basis in any kind of reality. You can kind of put the stories together that you want. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I had issue with the TV show because I mean, I have to say that Captain Carter works on the what if idea is that a couple of things happen. It causes Cap, someone doesn't die, causes Cap to not be there, and then they have to do it, and she becomes Captain America. She gets into the thing and becomes super powerful. That's the only one that keeps kind of the thread. But then T'Challa becoming Star Lord, the Marvel Zombies, what if Killmonger rescued Tony Stark? All these things are just kind of mashing together the stuff you want, sort of to what you were saying. I still feel like the first one was the only one that was close enough to say this is kind of what a what if is like, saying, okay, what if, Peter Parker takes a left turn and somebody else goes to the science fair and gets bit by the spider, or the spider doesn't bite him, go around the block and bites Mary Jane, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the what if, saying the same sort of things happen. So kind of looking at this makes me say, do it to all these other ideas because it's like they don't feel like real what ifs. They kind of feel
But
like whatever you want to do. What's
that's
up?
such a faulty premise to approach. I mean, it's what if. It's not, it's not fly by the seat of my pants. It's like,
Yes.
look,
Yeah.
the whole idea is we have established stories. Well, what if this happened? I mean, they're pretty much borrowing from the whole DC thing with the imaginary stories, which are what ifs. So, what if, Peter Parker wasn't Spider-Man? What if, you know, Peggy Carter became was the one who got the super soldier serum, super soldier enhancement, as it looks inside of the film. And one of that first one that they did on the television series, I was disappointed with because there wasn't a lot of thought into it. It was just that it was going to be a female Captain America. That was it. Because you look at Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers is emaciated. Well, not emaciated, but he looks sickly. He's underweight. He's under average height, but the biggest thing about him is his heart. He's the guy at the end of the day who's right for it. Once he gets in there, okay, he doesn't turn into like the Incredible Hulk or something with or like Venom when he's taking on the Venom formula. He's a fully realized 6'2" guy who looks like he goes to the gym. Pretty much it. They put Peggy in there. She comes out there, and I'm like, well, why does she have all this muscle and everything of this nature? You would have thought that she would have had like a realized form for a female. Instead, no. They had to go the Amazon route. All of her movements were the same thing that Steve Rogers would have done. There was nothing new about it other than the fact that she was, that she was a woman. And even that was like we don't add any of that type of stuff. So it's just like literally Captain America in a skirt. That was very disappointing. But then the very next episode with T'Challa, I really enjoyed that one because they kept his character and showed, well, look, if this guy goes here, how much it changes everything because of T'Challa's disposition, his charm, that even Thanos is somebody who could be won over just by his disposition to the point like, oh, you don't got to go about it this way. So that I thought was more imaginative, and it made for a better episode. But it was so hit or miss. You'd have these dumb things like, what if Killmonger, became Black Panther, and such gaping plot holes within the story. and it's not. I mean, to be fair, it's fiction. All fiction has like you know, it's not hard to start poking holes with it. At the end of the day, if you want to, but they could not stick the landing on a lot of those stories, especially after season one. The Doctor Strange one I thought was good. T'Challa was good, and there was, again, really hit or miss. But if the approach is, oh, we can do whatever we want, well, then you need all new characters, and then it's not what if anymore. These are your original stories. But if they're what if, they are without any doubt, and regardless of whether you like it or not, connected to the original source stories. So when to say something like that, it's very hubristic, number one, and then you get to see the result in the terms of the stories that were produced that didn't execute very well. However, they didn't execute very well for me. Going into 3 seasons, you would have to say that they found an audience that just doesn't care. Put some stuff up over here, and let's see how the whole thing breaks. So, I mean, did you remember the one where the Watchers fighting Ultron, where Ultron just
Oh,
starts taking on more and more abilities, becomes this multiversal aware cosmic being?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I looked, I was like, isn't the Watcher's supposed to be a pretty powerful, dude at the end of the day? And the best he could do in that fight was just put on some armor and shoot bolts. The fact that Ultron would become not just cosmically aware, but aware of the Watcher standing outside of the dimension that Ultron was in. I thought that was incredibly far fetched. But this was somebody who was just like, hey, let's just go for it. But the viewership didn't really care because they really turned the Watcher into a joke in order to execute this Ultron story which was the more important thing. But that was the thing that I saw overall with What If. The characters that we create, those are the important characters, and the other established guys, they're just kind of there. They're just kind of there for us to use as we see fit.
Well, I think I was watching the T'Challa one again, and I was like, besides it, obviously being fun and having Chadwick Boseman do the voice, like the thing that they're supposed to do is, like what if, which could blend into what's happening in the real comics is what if what's her name, Nebula, wasn't a mechanoid, half, like a cyborg, like going into, if she became, would she be the one we have in the comic books that was just hell on heels, or this one is kind of a tortured soul that's pushed to villainy and actually good. So like you could play you could actually do one of those stories and from the comic books where she came about, because I mean that for the regular comic books, Starlin had done a big trick because he kind of insulted the character, saying, "Oh, she's obviously lying," so he could get a surprise into the ending, because people are like, "Oh yeah, these other guys came along and." Even though they used her for like at least what was it? This Stern's first story. Then there's Walter Simonson, then Byrne. So it's like three big stories with Nebula, and then next thing you know, or four, because I think Walter Simonson used her twice. Um, then you get to the movies, and she's this person that's been tortured, like the way she was tortured in Infinity Gauntlet, but that's her whole life story. So it's like they could have done something like that to kind of play up and had utilize some of the comic book stuff, but it's like it's just a sad thing, because it's like they just started, the first two, and then everything else is kind of straying from the too far from the source, in my opinion. And then even the Nebula one they did was just kind of Chinatown, which Hollywood likes to do, but with Nebula, but not doing kind of that sort of stuff. And then it's kind of insulting to we're gonna do Howard the Duck over, but we're gonna do it with what's the name, the character, Darcy. We're gonna do the movie over, but we're gonna do it with Darcy. Like, you need to, if you're gonna do Howard the Duck, you need to really I don't know, figure out what really ticks for the character, instead of having people cheer every time you see them, or see a bit with them. And just remember that Disney's the one that caused, they made that the duck look like the way it looked, and they're close to the failure of it. So, but anyway, I just thought it was interesting. These new what ifs seem to stray farther and farther from the source. Like I think when they came back in the late '80s or early '90s, they looked like they were going for the fun, some stuff that may or may not be close to the concept of what if, but it looked like they were. And a lot of people, learned their craft in there, which was Liefeld and what's the name. They kind of started out doing a couple of stories in there. Greg Capullo did a Daredevil one, which was real, real connected to the concept. So that was kind of the bit that I wanted to get to. And I said, get closer to the the thing is, the hard part is that how do you get to the stories people want to see, and then say, well, we'll get to the stuff they didn't ask for, and then maybe people be like, well, let's see if they land the plane. If he has three personalities, Venom will be a fourth one. So let's play that out. Okay, and then oh yeah, we like Loki better than Thor, so let's see how this one plays out. So it's kind of like that they're trying to do, in my opinion. But at the same time, um, having Quicksilver go up against, Spider-Man, and well, I can't see it. You got Wanda on the team, or the duo with Spider-Man. You don't really need Spider-Man against Quicksilver, but we'll see how it goes. Any other last words?
I really hope these what if. Well, have you read any of the what ifs that came out recently?
Nope. I've been
No.
staying away. Nope. No, not at all.
I think the last batch that came out was what was the last one? What if the Hulk became a herald of Galactus? Which that's I think that's a pretty standard idea. Anybody becoming a herald of Galactus, I think you can get a story there. But that was like the last bit. It's that first series is golden, classic, great ideas. The second series, I have to put it at runner up because the first series just really set a pretty high bar. But the second series was still very entertaining overall. I didn't. It's tough. I think the stories that they were adapting were such classic stories with the first series that it's hard. It was hard to outdo those. But the second series actually ran longer and was you know still I thought very imaginative when they had some really good stories in there.
Mm-hmm.
They were really hitting a stride, and not just, I mean, some of the stories I thought were kind of like almost like monthly fodder, and that was something they didn't do with the first series. Was the first series, I think, was every 2 months. It was bi-monthly,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
doing it on a monthly basis can take stuff away. But they had some really good stories in that second series. Since then, kind of on, off, catch it as you can. But my biggest apprehension is like, hey, if this is going to if this is going to follow in the vein of the TV series, I don't need to watch it. Or rather, I don't need to read it. But I'll check out a couple of issues.
Okay. All right then. We got a for and we have an against. So that means check it out. Spinner rack
I'm out.
out.